Dina Wind Art Foundation. Thank you so much to John Wind and the foundation for hosting this event in this fantastic space. To kick things off, I'm pleased to introduce John Wind, who is probably familiar to most of you here today. Mixed media artist creating narrative portraits, assemblages, and installations. Also the co-founder of Maximal Art, Inc., well known for modern vintage fashion jewelry and gifts sold internationally under the John Wind brand. His work is in the permanent collections of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, my French is not great, in Paris, the PMA, and the Museum of the American Revolution. When his mother, artist and arts advocate Dina Wind, passed away in 2014, the Wind family established the Dina Wind Art Foundation. John is the president of the foundation, whose mission is to empower women artists, build community, and support arts education, all inspired by Dina's work and legacy. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. The Berman was also pleased to host an exhibition of Dina's work in 2018, so some of you may have seen it there as well. Martha Lucy is a specialist in 19th century French art and deputy director for research, interpretation, and education at the Barnes Foundation. She's the co-author of Renoir and the Barnes Foundation, published in 2012, and has written many essays on topics ranging from the noirs of Odilon Redon to the motif of the mirror in Impressionist painting. She holds a PhD from New York University's Institute of Fine Arts. Kati Gegenheimer is an artist, writer, and educator who recently mounted solo exhibitions at North Orange in New Jersey, Gross McLeaf in Philadelphia, as well as a two-person exhibition at Kristen Lorello in New York, where she will have a solo exhibition this October. Mark calendars. Group exhibitions featuring her work include the Woodmere 81st Annual at the Berman Museum, Mars in Cancer at David Peterson Gallery in Minneapolis, Reveries at Peak Projects in Philly, and Good Pictures curated by Austin Leah Jeffrey Deitch in New York. She's been a Pollock Krasner residency recipient at Yaddo, as well as an artist in residence at the Elizabeth Murray Arts Residency. And Lisa Hanover served as director and curator. Thank you. Served as director and curator of the Philip and Muriel Berman Museum of Art at our Science College from 1987 to 2012, the founding director of the museum.
Love that space.
Followed by a successful tenure as director and CEO of the Michener Museum from 2012 to 2017. Her broader role as senior leader in the cultural field has had a positive impact on art and history museums, humanities organizations, and other nonprofit entities. Hanover serves on several nonprofit boards and is an active peer reviewer for the American Alliance of Museums Excellence Programs, along with serving on the AAM Accreditation Commission. So, thank you all so much for being with us today for this conversation. Again, I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can, but I do want to just give a little bit of an overview of who we're talking about this afternoon. Françoise Gilot, born in 1921 in France, passed away in New York in 2023, just last year, holds an important place in the history of modern and contemporary art. While she's perhaps most often recognized still as the one-time partner of Picasso, she was herself one of the most prevailing artists from the post-World War II School of Paris and led a 70-year career, creating over 1,500 paintings and 4,000 works on paper. In addition to her painting and printmaking, she's remembered for her writing on the artistic titans of the 20th century. The Berman Museum of Art is an international center for the study of Gilot's works. In addition to her personal archives, the museum houses over 270 works of art by the artist, including the most comprehensive collection of her lithographs and etchings outside the artist's estate. The exhibition Françoise Gilot, Shaping Freedom Through Abstraction, curated by the very talented Elizabeth Coulter, is on view at the Berman through December 15th. And we also have several new digital resources online that our staff have been working on studiously over the last year or so, and so if you are interested in learning more about the collection itself and why we have it at the Berman, I invite you to come to the museum, see the show before it closes in December, and check out our resources online. Okay, so John, Lisa, Martha, and Kati are here today to provide their perspectives on women artists who forged opportunities for themselves and pursued ambitious professional aspirations despite the challenges they often faced in male-dominated spaces, on the historical context in which Gilot developed her practice, on her connection to the Philadelphia area and the Berman Museum of Art, and on her lasting legacy and impact on artists working today. Each speaker has some images to show, but we are going to try to keep the conversation spontaneous and somewhat informal. So to start our conversation off, I will hand things over to John, who will share a bit about the work of another very important artist and the reason we're here today, Dina Wind.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Events like this are really what we're all about, and it's so gratifying to see it come together like this. And it's extra gratifying to hear a story and discover an artist, a narrative that just resonates so much, and that the second Lauren shared with me the Gilot story, I'm like, wow, my mom would have really related to that. Being a woman artist of the 20th century, being a wife and a mom and a member of your civic community, trying to juggle it all at a time that didn't naturally invite women to participate in the same way. There was such a resonance there. So Dina started making art in the 70s when my younger brother and I were still kids at home. She started as a painter working with Sam Feinstein, who was a student of Hans Hofmann here in Philadelphia. Then she discovered metal sculpture and welding and studied at the Cheltenham Art Center with Leon Satarczyk, a well-known Philadelphia sculptor. The second she discovered sculpting, she stopped painting. It was just like an instant thing. It spoke to her, working with the found objects, creating beauty out of the detritus of society. From the beginning, she saw there was like an environmental message as well, which was pretty forward-thinking of her. And she belonged to Nexus Gallery here in Philadelphia, and then Viridian Gallery in New York. Both were similar in that they were artist collectives, and every 2 years or so, the artists would have a show. So she developed, and it's interesting, she joined Nexus the year my brother went to college. So she was an empty nester, and now was her chance. So she joined those galleries, started showing every 2 years or so a completely new body of work. A few pieces would sell. I mean, they were ambitious and large and somewhat dangerous. So it wasn't always an easy sell, but she was undeterred. It was, this was her way of communicating. It was her art form. And she took it all very, very seriously. She didn't have big commercial success, but somehow it didn't matter to her. And if anything, it made her more ambitious. And she reached a point where she stopped even thinking about selling, about making individual, discrete pieces. And in the last decade of her life, the work became more room-size environments. Hanging above our stairs, it's a piece of an entire room called Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So she was fierce. Her granddaughter called her a fierce lady welder, and that we go by that now. After she died, we started this foundation, as Lauren said, and have partnered with two institutions in particular. This is at the Woodmere Art Museum, to create enlargements of her work, something she had always dreamed of in her lifetime. And there's another one at Grounds for Sculpture. Bridget Mayer Gallery represents her estate and shows her work regularly. And then the foundation, to make a foundation meaningful, it couldn't just be about this person from the past. We wanted to use Dina's inspiration to support living artists and do, create relevant, modern partnerships. So on our website, we have a viewing room. We feature Philadelphia artists. Many of them were winners of the Fleischer Wind Challenge exhibition. That's been going on for 45 years. My parents got involved about 25 years ago supporting it. And I keep pointing over here because my father, Jerry Wind, Dina's husband, is right here in the crowd with us. And really, it's thanks to your support, vision, and partnership that all of this has happened. So thank you. So we do viewing rooms with in-person exhibitions. This was a show for Design Philadelphia. We took out the middle row of sculptures, and these are Simone Berman, a Philadelphia mirror artist. We showed her work. We've hosted performances, small-scale stuff, but artistic and edgy, creative. That was the Erotic Project. This was a panel discussion for Philly's Refocus celebration this spring. looking at comparing what was the state of things for women artists in the 70s compared to now. We sponsored a teen welding workshop at the Johnson Atelier, very much inspired by Dina's love of welding. We digitized the Wind Challenge, 45 years of artists, over 500 artists. These are incredible artists, some of whom have become quite well known, and there was no single place to talk about it or to research it. So we had it's been a 3-year project that culminated this summer with the launch of the online archive on our website. And we worked, this was with InLiquid, we sponsored a special cohort of InLiquid memberships to support younger and diverse artists. With very limited resources, but a lot of earnestness and goodwill, we're trying to make a difference. And this is a little bit different, telling the story of another artist, a deceased artist from the past, but it seemed just very relevant and meaningful, and it was my hope that we could help through our resources to tell a bigger story, help you tell the story to a larger audience.
Thank you, John.
Pleasure.
Thank you for sharing more about Dina and her work, and for championing conversations like this, and these artists who we need to be talking about more. And to that end, I will hand things over to you, Martha. Thank you.
And thank you to the Wind Foundation for supporting education at the Barnes. I am very happy to be part of this today. Partly because I was introduced to the Berman Museum through this program. I had never been out there, always wanted to, but just never had, and finally made the trip, and it's amazing. So I saw the Gilot exhibition, I saw the other 2 that were up, I loved them, I spent a lot of time there. And also to know about this place and what you do here. Never been here before, so this has been a lot of sort of discovery for me. Gilot herself also. I as an art historian, came to, as I think so many people do, came to Gilot through Picasso. The first time that I had ever heard of her was when I was doing a project on Picasso in grad school, and I read her book, and then got this picture of, when was it, 1964 that she wrote it? This picture of Picasso, not the most flattering picture. I didn't even know about his reaction to it, or I sort of learned about that in preparation for this today. Now I understand why she has been so written out of the history of art. It's incredible. I had seen her art a little bit, but didn't know that she had a career that spanned 70 years. And so it's just been a pleasure to look at her art sort of for its own sake. And I will also say that when I went to the Berman Museum exhibition, walk in and there is no reference to Picasso in the entire exhibition. Yes, I loved that. Yes.
Very intentional.
Yes. So I am going to reference Picasso. I already have. Here she is. I think that, and I'm just going to be sort of talking about a couple of things that struck me as I was learning more about Gilot. She came up as an artist and started her career as an artist smack at the beginning of World War II. I mean, what a crazy time to be making art, to just be living in general. And she was politically engaged. She was active. She went to a protest in 1940 and sort of against the German occupation, and was then kind of on this list of suspicious people that she had to report to the police every day. And so this is a really early work. This is a pen and ink drawing, and I know it's not a great slide, but I just wanted to show a sort of very early, very kind of overtly political work where she is. This is, you can see the title is Dead Rooster on a newspaper. The rooster is a sort of long-standing symbol of France, and so here you have a rooster that's dead on newspaper, which refers to what's happening. And this, so she's using symbols, and I think that one of the things that really kind of strikes me about like looking at her career across 70 decades is that there's this constant sort of going back and forth between real sort of like formalism and kind of a very sort of ordered geometry, but also this use of symbols. So here she is in 1945. She kind of gets rid of the representation, and she's going sort of fully abstract here. And she gets involved with this group called the Society of Réalité Nouvelle, or sort of New Reality, which means by New Reality they sort of were thinking of abstraction as a space other than real life, which would have been very appealing, like during the war, to not want to sort of exist in that space where atrocities are happening. So she's like with this group for a while. She's working in this very ordered, geometric, methodical way, and I think part of me as I'm thinking about her is I'm trying to kind of place her in the history of art. I'm like, where does she fall, and how does she fit, and one of the things is that you'll hear her described as she was part of the School of Paris. That doesn't really tell you much, right? The School of Paris is just a broad term that refers to basically any artist that was working in Paris during the early 20th century. So I'm like, okay, well, that could mean anything. But I think one thing to note about what she was doing early in her career is, here's that group that I was talking about. Sonia Delaunay was part of this group. This group really devoted to abstraction. This was the other sort of main strand in French art during World War II and after. And this movement is called art informel, or like tachisme. And it's characterized by, so this is the other sort of major impulse in French and European art at the time. And it's characterized by this sort of formlessness and this kind of like objects that are kind of like on the verge of like becoming or unbecoming. And just to sort of put her in context, so she's doing something very, very different from that. This I just love, and this is 1946. She's with Picasso at the time. She is often criticized for just ripping off Picasso's style, like, oh, she's doing Cubism, this looks like a Picasso. Well, everybody was doing Cubism. Cubism had become absorbed. There's a Picasso from 1921 at the PMA, and here's some other artists. Everybody is working in this language. It just becomes a language, like one of the major languages for art of the 20th century. Even Matisse, who hated Cubism, had to grapple with it. So my point is that she's not ripping off Picasso. She's doing what everybody else is doing. And here, she's also using it not just to sort of do some sort of formal exploration or to kind of theorize about perception, and which is kind of what like Picasso and Braque were doing. She's making a point about gender, and he is stuffing that apple in her face, and you can't see her mouth, and it's really a pretty violent image. And then this is another one that I find really striking. It's called The Painters, 1952. This is like right before I don't mean to make everything in relation to Picasso. I really don't, but I just think that this work is so important as part of kind of her early kind of, feminist approach. She is standing with a group of artists. Notice she's over on the right, how she's crowded out. She is a maker of art, but everybody's in the picture is looking at a representation of her. That's what the white square is. She drew from so many different artists. Matisse, I mean, you can see how much she kind of uses Matisse's sort of language and does something different with it. This I had never seen before. This is at the exhibition, and I don't know if you're thinking what I'm thinking, but yeah, I was like, whoa. And I actually went and talked to our archivists, and I said, do we have any evidence that Gilot visited the Barnes? Is there any correspondence with her? And there isn't. It doesn't mean she didn't visit. But she certainly knew this work. And we could go on, but I'll kind of skip ahead. She talked about Matisse as being an influence on her, and that he helped her to sort of, just really embrace abstraction and color, and to be really free with color. And this is my last slide, just to show that, just to sort of make the point that she's constantly trying out kind of different things throughout her career. Like, she works in lithographs, she works in oils, she does mixed media, she does pen and ink drawings. She sometimes is sort of just representing everyday objects, like the still life in the top, in the middle, the red, but then also doing these really dreamlike images. And she talks a lot about art as something that, it doesn't have to be something that you observe in the world. It's something that, that you observe in your mind's eye. And so she's, I'm just struck by her always sort of exploring, and throughout her career, and sort of just reaching and going forward, like, fearlessly. She was a pretty fearless person.
Thank you, Martha. I think, I completely agree, and I think the exhibition, while it's small, the exhibition up at the Berman right now, it does kind of infiltrate some of those experimental
together.
Yeah. Right. It was sort of like a bite-sized history lesson into her life. Lisa, you're going to bring it kind of forward a bit.
When it scratched the surface.
Looking at Adam forcing Eve with the apple, we showed that at the Berman. I'm wondering how the hell it ended up in the Melbourne Museum. There must have been some, because it was not part of that collection when we showed it. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And the acrobats was in a closet on her 8th floor apartment, the diptych. And I was there one day, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. She goes, do you want it? And I said, yes, we would love to have that piece in our collection. And it is on view it's a diptych. So there's another part of it. Yeah, look at that piece on the right. Look at the color in that piece. Really, when she found her mature language and vocabulary, it was really the bottom right that she excelled in. Good thing she lived to, what was it, 101? Yeah. So let's get to the big hair picture. Isn't that amazing? Not the hair, I'm talking about the portrait. So I just wanted to point out that this is Mel Yoakum, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Claude Picasso, Françoise Gilot, Jonas Salk, Paloma Picasso, and me.
Wow, that's quite a group.
Quite a group.
In Collegeville, PA, right?
In Collegeville, Pennsylvania. And my participation here today really is to represent Mel Yoakum, who has had a health issue and was unable to participate. He also lives in Greece, and he would have participated via Zoom. And given his health issue, he said this would not translate well. And Lauren asked, and Mel supported my participation today. And I'm so delighted, and thank you, John, for hosting us. Mel was Françoise's curator, archivist, and global representative for close to 25 years. He has worked with museums, galleries, and collectors around the world to prepare exhibitions and scholarship of the highest caliber. His support, knowledge, and influence to create a space for Françoise Gilot it continues today. He has been a friend to the Berman Museum of Art since 1992 in our efforts to steward her legacy. Mel facilitated access to Françoise's vast inventory. He curated 4 exhibitions for our organization, was the author of Stone Echoes, original prints by Françoise Gilot, a catalogue raisonné, which the Berman Museum of Art published in conjunction with an exhibition. And these were the last lithographs Françoise produced for this book. There's a special collector's edition that has 4 lithographs that Françoise created. She never worked in that medium again. And it was done at the Jacques Merlot studios in Paris. He is the primary author of Françoise Gilot Monograph, 1940 to 2000. He also facilitated several major gifts of Gilot's work to the Berman by not only the artist, but by other collectors. And I'm jingling because John wanted me to wear my charm bracelets because he creates charms. So I thought, well, let's honor that. In any case, I'm sorry if I'm noisy. Mel's professionalism, his expertise, and his genuine love for Françoise's work has been the key to our success. And when I say our, the Berman, it's the Berman, as the locus of study for this artist. That was the first time I met Françoise, and I will tell you about that because her connection to our namesake, the Philip and Muriel Berman Museum of Art, totally predated the founding of that museum by many, many, many years. The Bermans were based in Allentown, Pennsylvania, active collectors of historic and contemporary art and deeply engaged with the artistic communities of Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, and Jerusalem. They saw her work at the Finley Gallery in 1964 in New York City. They proceeded to acquire canvases, drawings, and began to commission her for lithographs for their various philanthropic causes. The Bermans also served as an entree for Françoise with various U.S. organizations, collectors, and studios. So, the Bermans supported the Salk Institute. They're out there doing stuff, and they introduced Françoise to Jonas. And Pablo Picasso, Jonas Salk, who's left? Really, I mean, it's just unbelievable. But they got married, and the Bermans also owned Hess's department store, and Muriel helped Françoise pick out her wedding attire to marry Jonas. It's just all full circle. So Ursinus College invites Jonas Salk to be the keynote speaker at a Founders Day convocation in 1991. He also received an honorary degree. That was again facilitated by Muriel and Philip Berman. Why would you come to Ursinus College, of all places? Because Philip and Muriel said it would be a good thing. And Jonas Salk was one of the nicest, down-to-earth people I have ever met. And he arrived with his speech, and it was all handwritten. And he says, "Can you type this for me?" And I'm like, I could barely read it. But typed it up for him, and of course Françoise came, and we had already had these particular lithographs, so I framed them and put them up so that when I gave her the tour of the museum, she would see her work all, displayed, and that's when I asked her if she might consider doing an exhibition with us. Oh, there she is. Look at this. She used that albatross in so many of her works. So what she does is, she gives me her business card, and it has Mel Yoakum's contact information as her curator and archivist. And she says, talk to Mel. And so that's how we met Mel. And he guided our conversations with Françoise to be able to do this first exhibition. We focused on the lithographs because they had really never been comprehensively studied, shown together, and we have a 3,500, not 35,000, that's an airport, 3,500 square foot main gallery which she loved. She thought that was just a beautiful space. So she gave Mel full license to develop this exhibition, create the catalogue raisonné, which was distributed by the University of Pennsylvania Press, which is just a wonderful way to create a place for Françoise, not only in art history, but as a living, working woman artist. That opening was the last time this group, this family was together, because Jonas died 2 months later. Claude and Paloma flew in for this. They were so happy, so proud that their mother was getting this kind of recognition and scholarship. It was just phenomenal, just amazing. And Jacques Merlot flew in too, the master printer. And I think I arranged for them to get to the museum from the airport. And I got an Hermes scarf as a thank you. He arrives with me, says, thank you for arranging. I go, oh, I got to do more. It was just amazing. I'm wearing it actually in that photo. Yeah, I mean, come on, isn't that just amazing?
What year was that?
That was 1995. 1995. So,
Gorgeous.
as a result of that particular exhibition, several lenders to the show, I'm talking about the lithograph show, donated lithographs to the Berman Museum to form the core of our comprehensive collection of that genre. With the exception of a very few impressions, the Berman has the largest collection of the prints, and we continue to work to fill in the pieces that are extant. Mel has worked diligently to complete our holdings with gifts from his own personal collection. Really, our collection is more comprehensive than the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, which has a lot of this work, and even her own holdings. So over the years, I was so fortunate to be able to go to New York to visit Françoise in her apartment on West 67th Street, right around the corner from the Café des Artistes, and in the brownstone row of buildings that were built very specifically to be artist studios. Duchamp had his studio there, and this is part of her studio here. It was a studio, but it had this human scale living quarters with these brick barrel vault ceilings, but it was again human scale, and then this big 2-story north-facing really studio that she also used as a library. Oh, I'll show you. Oh, there's Mel. Look at him. You'll get to see the recording. That's our former president with Françoise. She did a major event for the major donors for the Berman Museum in her studio in New York. What she did to facilitate our own importance in place was quite extraordinary. And there's Mel and Françoise together. So that's the studio space that she cleaned up for the reception. But I mean, she would have several easels going, and you can see she showed her work, and then she had stacks and stacks and stacks of canvases. And we'd go to visit. Mel would fly in from California, and I'd train up, and we would just have the most amazing conversations, and she would talk about Pablo too. But we would go over to these canvases and she'd pull them out, and she would give us a master class in color theory, in drawing, and yes, she would acknowledge Matisse and Pablo, but also the canon of artists that were part of her circle. But she wasn't derivative. It was not derivative. She was very proud of Paloma and Claude. Their resilience during their early lives. Pablo did not acknowledge them. They had to sue him to get their rightful place. Then both of them went on to cement his legacy in terms of the Picasso Foundation and the work and the scholarship. And they did license a few things. You've seen mugs around, I'm sure. They still do that, actually. But they really have been such a strength, and Claude is no longer living, to carry on their father's legacy and now their mother's legacy, because Paloma is taking on the mantle of Françoise's inventory and, again, her legacy. So I'm quite certain she'll be working with the Berman on several things. So in 1997, that might be the end, yeah. We did a second exhibition, Forever in a Day, floating paintings and monotypes. I mean, big, huge monotypes that she worked on in New York at the Judith Sadolkin. She also worked with Tamarin. And then these raw canvases that would hang from the ceiling. Beautiful. We did a third exhibit in 2001 of her works between 1940 and 50, which we had that Adam forcing Eve, the apple. That opened the week after 9/11. Françoise came. We awarded her an honorary degree along with Marguerite Lenfest, who was on my board at the time. And it was a very solemn occasion and very poignant as well. Our fourth exhibit was called Transitions, and that was in 2012, and it consisted of her paintings from the 1950s to the 2000s, and that traveled. So Gilot's support and participation and our collaborations were very genuine, very rich, and very exciting. She has made subsequent gifts of paintings, drawings, lithographs, etchings, and a portfolio of over 80 works, which came in 2010 to support our Pfeiffer wing, which also has a works on paper study area. I mean, those drawings, I mean, it's Jonas, it's her first self-portrait. Amazing work. So, the Françoise Gilot Archives, which the Berman holds, was started in 1987. Françoise would give Mel Yoakum items along the way, including drafts of Matisse and Picasso, A Friendship in Art, edited in her own hand, drafts of Painter and the Mask, her original clipping book from Life with Picasso. So Martha, you gotta look through that. It is amazing. And it really does document the legal pursuits, etc., and she persevered. Yeah, it's amazing. There is correspondence, there are consignment documentation, there are family photos. We have photos from Françoise's grandparents and her early life. Extensive paper work on the making of our lithograph collection, so that's fully documented. All of this was cataloged by Mel Yoakum and donated to the Berman in 2021, and it's an important study center resource for the museum. And that material has since been digitized through a great grant that Lauren and her staff pursued from the IMLS. It is thrilling. We're so pleased to have this collection, and thank you for recognizing its importance, not only for us, but for the greater art world.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I feel like those personal stories and experiences are
Amazing.
incomparable when it comes to a conversation like this, and just to bring so much of her life to life for us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Katie, I think you're going to tell us about how you see traces of her in artists working today, including yourself.
Thanks. Well, my head is spinning. I don't know. I'm processing our art historical kind of contextualization and like a personal account of a life, and really giving her place with her work too. And I feel like that's so important when artists are living, to support them. And maybe I'm here to say that as an artist who's living and working here in Philadelphia, in a greater community of like many female artists who are working today. And I teach also at Tyler School of Art, and something that I think about with my graduate students there in painting is how we develop a lineage, right? Like when they're making work, they're absolutely relevant in anything that they're making at age, say 22, to 52, as we're moving through time. And I emphasize, well, what's your lineage? Where do you place yourself? Who do you want to be in context with? And I think maybe this look back at Gilot right now, and kind of recontextualizing her, recognizing her work, and thinking about, well, where has this landed? Where has this landed now? And that was the view that I wanted to come into this with. When I went to the Berman and saw this show, I was really just thinking about so many different artists who are working today, who I can kind of recognize moments and pieces of, in her color, in her structure, and in her invention. Something that I love about the show at the Berman is actually process, and how you show process, which may or may not come up in museum shows, and I felt like that in terms of the archive was so revealing. And exciting to me, you know, and when I was kind of thinking about what artists I could relate to her as well, I was thinking, well, who's working in multiple mediums and actually like there presently? You know, it isn't outsourced work that's being produced, but rather you're in the print studio making the work alongside master printers, you know, you're making the paintings, and how that all informs a web of thinking and making. So, you know, I hesitated when I was sending Lauren my slides to send, you know, 20, 30 artists. Like some people I was thinking about were like Emma Amos in her like versatility of materials, Nicole Eisenman, particularly her portraits and busts, Kiki Smith, Faith Ringgold, Mary Frank, and Joan Brown were some people that came to mind. But, you know, I also want to highlight a few visually that I found real linkages to. Judith Linares, an artist raised in California, worked in the Bay Area, now lives and works in New York City. Linares' work, you know, has a touch on mythology, has a definite feminism to it. If you're looking at her bouquets, you know, they have both a come hither attitude, but also kind of like an aggression and a know-how, and they really feel like they form right there on the canvas. But I felt like not only in form, but in color, and a real agency over that. Linares was a great example of someone who I felt like, oh, I could totally link these two. You know, and then I was thinking about Gilot. I absolutely love this color lithograph called Genetic Patterns. And kind of the mixing of media here and the mixing of, you know, an actual pattern to these cutouts and how that is composed. But then to someone like Chie Fueke, an artist born in Japan, raised in Brazil, and now Chie works in Beacon, New York. And this is actually some of Chie's acrylic and mixed media on mulberry paper, also makes paintings, also makes prints. But, you know, even the use of, say, like this graph paper as something aesthetically that's going to hold place, that's going to offer a contrast to something more organic, like a portrait. Also documenting people who are in her community, who she's in relationship to, is something really important in Chie's work, and just like kind of melding materials. So I really encourage you to look at more of all of these artists' work, because they're all working today, and quite prolifically. I wanted to bring up Beverly Acha's work as well. Beverly's work, you know, often comes out of the diagrammatic, the landscape, architecture, and color. I feel like that's when I think about her work. This is a painting, oil on canvas, but Beverly is also quite prolific in print as well. But I was thinking about even like this radial composition, and just like who does that and when and where. And as an artist, radial composition is actually a pretty tricky thing to pull off, I think. Even something as bold as working with like a red and green, like really complicated to come up with your proportions to not create like a Christmas tablescape, but instead something sophisticated. So I really wanted to highlight Beverly's work as well. She lives and works in Brooklyn, New York, and teaches up at Bennington right now, but a fantastic painter. And finally, because I was asked to, actually, I'm not quite, you know, used to that, but my own work, this is a brand new painting, still maybe a little bit wet in the studio, called Untangling Knots, the End of Endings. This is in my show that's opening at Kristen Lorello in a few short weeks on October 12th. It'll be up through November 16th. But you know, it was such a treat, and I want to go back to the digitization of the archive as well, because I was really just diving through all of Gilot's work and thinking about, you know, her work in terms of like series too, of the elements, or of time, or of seasons. And I've done seasons work myself as well, and just being able to kind of see another artist who, you know, Gilot for me is just as alive, you know, through the work. And so to be able to kind of comb through that and think about that in context was a real treat. So I'm so appreciative of kind of this new lens on her, but also the space, you know, that her work creates for artists working today.
It is so interesting to me to hear from another person who makes art to see, what the connections are that you're making, who the people are that you're thinking of, and what you're finding in her work that's so different from what I think each of us has talked about seeing in the work here today. I'm sure we all could keep talking the rest of the afternoon, but I do want to open it up and see if folks have questions in the audience.
Well, I did find it interesting that she wrote a book about her time with Picasso instead of sort of cutting them out, because I appreciate your show that Picasso's name wasn't in it.
She was still really young when she wrote that too. And I think she wanted something concrete so that her children would be recognized. And again, if Françoise's work is shown with Pablo's as someone else curating it and bringing it together.
It wasn't her need to bring them in so that her work would be seen.
No. In fact, he was very successful in having her banned from exhibiting in most of Europe.
Really?
He said, if you want to show my work, you will not show her work.
Really?
Oh, yes.
But did she have a philosophy behind what she was doing? Was it a religion, or was there anything that she talked about? The quote in your pamphlet was very strong about being focused and with your energy on your work.
When she first came over to the United States, she didn't have a permanent place. She had her studio in Paris and in one in London at a certain point in time, because she was beginning to be represented. That was back in the 70s and early 80s. But once she met Jonas, she established her studio in La Jolla, and you can see during those 25 years together, the palette of California and the landscape come through. She never talked about a philosophy. Again, I'm trying to revisit in my head some of our conversations, but she paid attention very early on. I mean, Pablo did work with her. Matisse did work with her. Sonia Delaunay, they had a very close relationship.
There's this artist statement that's on view with
Yes.
a couple of artists, Patricia
Yes.
Clark.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where you can see a little bit of her theorizing. I don't know. I think it's undated. So, but she talks. Like the one thing that I kind of latched onto was she says something like, "The mind is rich with images for art." So, it's which is an idea that really kind of goes back to like the late 19th century, the symbolists and surrealism.
I was just saying, apropos of what news you might have heard, I don't know what you guys about, but I saw that it seemed like big news in the art press that the Picasso Museum in Paris announced last March that for the first time they're going to include Gilot's permanent collection, and I don't know whether that's Paloma's influence.
It is.
Or outright. So you sort of read between the lines.
And it's from
there.
most of
But
her
but
collection.
but I wonder, and Lauren's heard me on this, like as a media person, I came across this story, and it's like, how do people not know this? And you look at the coverage that she got in her last years from CBS Sunday Morning.
That's
Times
right.
To the New Yorker.
That's right.
And I mean, and her obits, some new people who've read, and no one knows about this, and yet this place is the center of her work and her legacy the last 30 years of her life. So to me, this is a story waiting to be
It's an
heard.
opportunity,
But it is
sure.
interesting that the Picasso Museum has now
Yes.
recognized this. But you don't have to go to Paris, you go to Collegeville.
There's this kind of correction
Right.
Yes.
that's happening now,
That's
which
a
is great.
really good
But
statement.
But I noticed during reading a lot of those obits, I read a lot of them just, and they're all kind of the same. They tell the story of her being kind of,
In the
persona non
context
grata
of-
in France, and how that affected her career. And it's like, oh, and she was an artist. None of them really get into her art. It's kind of like, it's even they're still talking about her in relation to Picasso. And as I think, I don't know who had pointed this out, but maybe it was somebody at the Picasso Museum said Picasso was only part of her life for 10 years.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
How did Jonas figure in? Being
There's
a
a
pretty
question.
special man himself, how did he went to her openings, you know?
He did. He was amazing, actually. And genetic patterns were specifically for Jonas. You know, the hands and all the DNA, etc. They just made this complementary couple. He was so supportive of her, and vice versa. It was a real love affair.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Got a question over here.
I was wondering if there was, she became a known artist because of Picasso and her relationship with Picasso. Was there a moment during her career that was like an exhibition or something that was like the tipping point where people started recognizing, oh, she is an artist independent of her relationship with Picasso? Or maybe not, if people are still always thinking about her as Picasso's partner.
I don't think so. I think they are not thinking of that, but it is part of her story. And so it has to be acknowledged. I mean, let's go with it. Why not? But she was very young. She was only 21 when she met Pablo. But she'd already been drawing and working and painting for 10 years, even though her father wanted her to be a lawyer. And as Martha was saying, I mean, she was seen as a communist and a danger to Paris. So she did have to check in every single day. But then she would have her studio. And she did achieve several exhibitions on her own merit without Pablo's influence or talking to people. So people were recognizing her innate talent, but it took 101 years to make it mature.
Yes. Probably like when she first started exhibiting in the US. Whenever that
I
was.
think that gave an independence, yeah.
Mid-60s or something.
Her lithography work is very distinctive. It's so much different than other lithographers.
Roxanne, you were talking about how the case was made for Françoise not having been derivative. What's the word?
Derivative.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
We
know.
looked at
It's
some-
like faint digitization. I can't say it.
I can't either.
We looked at some other images of other artists' work. We said that she was not derivative in her practice. Was there a moment at which that sort of became clear?
That's a very good question. I mean, you take lessons from your mentors, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
But everybody ultimately has their own path. But you're going to
Exactly.
take notes.
Yeah.
Like the great quote is like, be a good thief. Like take what you need from
Yeah.
people and then move forward accordingly. So it's not necessarily derivative. It's you're a person of the world. We all have bodies. We all have transmissions. We all live in times. And you take with that what you will. So that's how I think about it when I'm making work. You know, if I put it side by side with somebody, you know, there are things we recognize in humanity that come through.
It's really annoying when people, it's like one artist can be kind of riffing off of what another artist does or doing an homage to that artist or kind of taking elements and it's not derivative. It's like, I don't know, it's a riff.
Yeah.
But then when she does it, it's derivative or it's called derivative and it's like you said, it's like all artists.
Well, the gift
Works
is
that
to
way.
like pick up where someone else left off.
It-
Like if I look at
exactly.
Gilot and something brilliant that happened with color, why would that not get picked up and then pushed
Definitely.
forward?
Right.
Definitely.
So it seems like it tells us a lot more about the critic than it does about the artist, because it's sort of like that conceit of like, tell me what's wrong with my outfit. There's always an answer, right? So I would actually challenge you guys to tell me a single artist that couldn't be put in a frame where you could find a derivative and not derivative. Is there? I don't think you could find one. And so I think it's an agenda, right? If you're looking for derivativeness, which was a way of silencing her,
Exactly.
you find it all over the place. If you had a different critical framing, it would be homage, it would be building on, it would be the anxiety of influence. There's all sorts of positive ways you can put it. But so I think it just, by the way the critic frames it, the critic's telling you more about themselves than about the artist. Maybe.
Well said.
I mean,
Parallel to Lee Krasner is astonishing because Lee Krasner was awesome in her lifetime, but it took so long for the recognition to be there because she was Pollock's wife. educated.
That's a
And she was
great
a serious
analogy.
student, and she studied with the greats, and then she had a different thing. With the ABACs, the men dominated.
Yeah.
Every woman in ABACs was second generation. They couldn't be seen as first gen. But
And she
still,
created his entire career.
I
Yeah,
know. And I've
Yeah.
been in a room with them when I bought another painting from another artist, and they had these Krasners out, and they were fabulous.
Wow. That's a great analogy.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the subjugation actually is why hurt her career, that she was married to Pablo.
Wow.
Just a comment that it would seem that Picasso must have really recognized her inherent talent and brilliance and vision, because he was so threatened by her that he had to prohibit her. You know, he had a head start. He was older, had more time in the game, and but he didn't want her competing. He must have seen that she had that potential.
It's 10 long years, and half of his mistresses committed suicide, and so, you know, she was a pretty strong individual.
Very strong.
But that's a very important context, I think, that you just provided.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you
Great
to our
job.
speakers and to
Wow.